We're going to now move to the panelist questions. Let's start with Mike Lequier, who has a question for Ms. Ayotte on taxes.
Thank you, Scott. The Bush tax cuts are set to expire at the end of this year, and many are calling for them to be extended. Some have expressed support extending tax cuts for the middle class, and others have expressed support for extending all the tax cuts. Which strategy will benefit the nation's economy the most?
Well, right now, with the difficult economy that we're in, the last thing that we should be doing is raising taxes. And this is a real difference between myself and Congressman Hodes. As a member of Congress, he left from Washington without voting on what the tax rates will be for anyone in this country. That shows a real lack of leadership because none of us knows what our tax rates will be in January. But I don't think that we should raise taxes on anyone right now. We should be cutting spending in Washington to make the hard choices rather than putting more burden on the American people. And when you look at those tax rates, when you think about the tax rates that my opponent has been criticizing me on, that's 750,000 small businesses in this country. It's also a $300 million tax hit to people here in New Hampshire. It's half the business income in this country, and it's a quarter of the workforce that work for those companies. If we want to get our economy back on track, we should not be raising taxes. And frankly, Congress should have made a decision and actually voted on what the tax rates are going to be in this country. And we've seen that lack of leadership in Washington from Congressman Hodes and those that he's worked with in Congress.
Ms. Ayotte, thank you. Mr. Hodes?
We have a long-term deficit crisis and a short-term jobs crisis. Middle-class families have been hammered in this recession. I support tax cuts for the middle class. We need to extend them and make them permanent so that people in the middle class can spend in this economy. My opponent wants to give tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires that would cost us $700 billion bad to the deficit. That means taking from our kids, our grandkids, or borrowing from China to give tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, hurting the deficit by $700 billion. That's not fiscally responsible. How can you support giving $100,000 a year to people who make $1 million in this economy and hurting middle-class families? How is that possibly fiscally responsible? It doesn't make economic sense because it's the middle class, when they have money in their pockets, that spends the money. And we've got to stop giving tax incentives to shipping our jobs overseas, and we've got to pay attention to small businesses in this country. It's small businesses who need the help, and that's why I proposed making sure our small businesses can invest in capital equipment and write it off, do research and development and manufacture here. It's time to make Made in America mean something again. I'm for tax cuts for middle-class families and small businesses. My opponent wants tax cuts for millionaires, and she supports policies that ship our jobs overseas.
Mr. Hodes, thank you.